All right, and we want to welcome Raj Ayyar, and he will be talking to us today about My Place in the Placeless, an introduction to the spirit and style of Sufism. Let me go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and then Raj, whenever you're ready.
Can you hear me clearly, Ben, and see me?
Good.
Oh, very
We can hear
good.
you.
Very good. It always gives me a growing sense of joy to join this UU fellowship and any UU fellowship anywhere in the world. My association with the UUs, with Unitarian Universalists, goes back over 40 years. That is no mean innings. I have very fond memories of this particular fellowship. We have arm wrestled in spirit. We have exchanged insights and interacted in person. There are so many happy memories of my visiting there. Birthdays celebrated there. I remember my aunt, Kamala Subramaniam, who showed up there out of the blue in the early 2000s. Her daughter, Sharda, is supposed to be joining us today, my cousin. So this is a place brimful of memories and brimful of very, very poignant connection. And thanks again for inviting me. Now, of course, the virtual presence of the UUs is not nearly the same as being with you in your feistiness, in your multi-layeredness, and in your great cultural diversity, in person. But thanks to the pandemic, we don't really have a choice, do we? International flights are barely in the process of opening up. And so we have to make do with the rigors of the current situation and go with that. And in that context, I welcome these virtual gatherings and hope they will flourish even more, till we can meet again in person. One of the things that we need to understand about the Sufis is that the Sufis constantly challenge a narrow, demonized, Islamophobic caricature of Islam that pins that religion down to an ugly monolith ridden with fundamentalism and terrorist rumblings. The Sufis are lighthearted. They challenge us. They remind us that life is not a caravan of despair, as in the modified Rumi hymn that you picked for your service. Ours is not a caravan of despair, says Rumi. Come, come, yet again come. For ours is not a caravan of despair, but a caravan of hope. Wanderer, lover, leaver, it doesn't matter who you are. Come, come, yet again come. That is the spirit, the eclectic, all-embracing, invitational spirit of Sufism. The Sufis challenge dogma. They invite us constantly to rethink who we are. They are not binary in their approach to life. They have a peculiar neither nor logic. I am neither of land nor of sea, says Rumi. I am neither from above nor from below. My place is the placeless, a trace of the traceless. My place is the placeless, a trace of the traceless. And this, I think, is a very good stage setting opening for Sufism. Let's also remember the Sufi master Baha'u'ddin's mighty clap. there was a restless caged bird who had wandered into Bahauddin's rooms. Just as he was talking to this unhappy young man, the seeker who was burned out, who didn't know where to go, who had reached the end of his emotional and intellectual tether. Bahauddin said, with a mighty clap of his hands, just leave, drop your studies, drop your intellectual wanderings, drop your intellectual going around in circles, just leave, enjoy life. And seemingly this message was addressed to the bird too, who looked very agitated and kept fluttering around the room. So it's almost as if the bird and the scholar were both in this trap. And Bahauddin, with this clap, was advising them to go outside and to seek a new world of wonder, of discovery, unchartedness outside. There is a wonderful story about the Sufi trickster Mullah Nasruddin. And many of you are familiar with Nasruddin's stories. You know, Nasruddin has made his way into Russia. He's made his way into Turkmenistan and into Uzbekistan. Nasruddin is all over the place. And Mullah Nasruddin is a Sufi trickster. He's the fall guy of Sufism. He is frequently absurd, of course. He also teaches us through paradox, through neither nor logic, through a complete absurd reversal of just what we would expect from him or from anyone else. And Mullah Nasruddin, in spite of all his absurdities, is really considered a holy figure, a sacred figure in Sufism, because in the end, he points us toward the truth. Here is an account of Nasruddin's core mystical teaching, which is also the mystical teaching of Sufism and of many other mystical traditions. And this is the story of Mullah Nasruddin and the keys. His neighbors found Mullah Nasruddin searching feverishly for something outside his house. It was growing dark, and they wondered what it was. "What are you looking for, Mullah?" they asked him. "My keys, my house keys," he replied with some agitation. "Where did you leave your keys last?" "Inside my house," snapped the mullah. "Why are you looking for your keys outside if you've left them within?" "Ah," said the mullah, "because there is more light out here." And this is such a telling parable because so many of us seek the truth without, the truth outside. Trying to find love in all the wrong places, trying to find financial security, trying to find abundance, trying to find joy, trying to find meaning in life out there instead of within. And of course, the truth of the matter is that the keys are always within the house. All you need to do is to shine a light within and to look for those keys. And yet the mind, the monkey mind that the Hindu mystics talk about, the monkey mind is always looking for the key to wisdom, the key to inner understanding, the key to the kingdom within in all the wrong places, always looking without, all outside. Then again, it gets very feverish because it wants the answers and it cannot find them. So Nasruddin reminds us that if we calm down and if we look for the keys of wisdom within us, we will find them eventually. Are we going to find them the next minute? Maybe, maybe not. Another of my favorite mullah stories is the story of Mullah and the peppers. And this is about how we constantly sabotage ourselves looking for happiness and looking for relief and looking for the exception that will somehow make our lives hunky-dory and miraculous. His neighbors found Mullah Nasruddin sitting on the sidewalk outside his house. It was bright, glaring sunlight. Must have been about 2 in the afternoon in this hot little Middle Eastern town, graced by Mullah Nasruddin. Nasruddin sat on the sidewalk, poring over a huge pot of red-hot peppers. And he was stuffing the peppers into his mouth, one after the other. Tears streamed down his cheeks, and he presented a generally miserable expression. His neighbor said, "Why are you doing this to yourself, Mullah? Why are you eating the peppers, knowing that each one is probably hotter or as hot as the one before it?" "Well," replied Nasruddin, trying to control his streaming eyes, coughing and spluttering, "because I hope to find a sweet pepper in there somewhere." And that's the mind. That's the monkey mind again, always looking for something that's unlikely to be there. How many sweet peppers have we sought in the busyness and transactions of life, and we never have found them, have we? There is a story, a Sufi story, about the Sufi master Junaid. And Junaid was without a lineage. You know, like most masters in different traditions, many Sufi masters have a lineage. They have masters who came before them, who taught them. Someone asked Junaid what his lineage was, and he said, "I have none. But," he said, "I have 3 teachers. A thief, a boy, and a dog." His listeners, interested, said, "Can you tell us about these 3 teachers? Who are they?" And Junaid says, "I lived with the thief for 3 whole years. I was desperately broke, and so was he. And so we were roommates. And one of the things that struck me about this robber was that he was so intensely and consistently optimistic and cheerful that no matter what happened, he'd be nearly caught and handed over to the cops. He botched several robberies he would not find the treasure he was looking for. And so he would emerge from his days, sweaty attempts at pilfering houses with nothing to show for it. And yet the man remained steadfastly cheerful, steadfastly optimistic, steadfastly, tomorrow is another day. I'm going to start over and I'm going to find a nice, juicy house to rob. And this time I'm going to be successful. And Junaid said, I learned a lot from that man. Not that I approve of his moral habits, but just the fact that he had this never say die attitude. And that whatever his occupation, he was convinced that there was hope around the corner. And that in a very real sense, he was going to get the treasure the very next minute. Things were going to be all right. Life was not all about gloom and doom. My second teacher, said Junaid, was a boy, probably 9 or 10 years old. I met him one dark night. He had a very dim lamp, and he used the lamp to show us the way. So I asked him curiously, where does the light of this lamp come from? And the boy replied, where does it go to? And blew out the light. And Junaid said, this was profound. I had never reflected on life and death, and I had never reflected on where the lamp of living comes from or goes. I learned a lot, he said, from that one night with the boy. Finally, Junaid said, my last teacher was a dog. And the dog showed me that there were no sacred or profane places, no places where you could not go. There were no caste restrictions. There was no up or down. The dog rolled in the mud, and the dog would bathe in whichever stream he found. And he would sometimes drink water from that stream too. So he had no rules of purity and pollution. And he said, I learned a lot from that dog. There is a wonderful Sufi saying. The light is one. The lampshades are many. This is a saying ascribed to Rumi again. Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi, who's arguably one of the greatest Sufis of all time, indeed, one of the greatest mystics of all time, whatever the tradition. This reminds us of the 19th century Hindu mystic Ramakrishna. When you say the light is one, the lampshades are many, there is only one light. And yet the modes of describing this light, modes of adorning the light, the modes of concealing the light are very different. Ramakrishna said, there are many different ways up that mountaintop to the spiritual goal, to the ultimate. From your perch on your path, all the other paths look different. But when you reach the summit of the mountain, all of them are the same. My friends, the real challenge for the 21st century is restoring Islam to its Sufi roots. Not only convincing doctrinaire and dogmatic Muslims about the truth of Sufism, but also the Islamophobes out there who are convinced that Islam has absolutely no redeeming value. And we need to realize that the truth of Islam is the Sufi spirit and the Sufi nuance. And that wonderful Sufi neither nor logic. And the Sufi story, the Sufi quest within, the Sufi acceptance of the essential truth of all faiths, the Sufi lack of dogma. Here is the hope for the spirit of Islam to rise again from its slumbering in the ashes to where it can actually guide us and be one of the many lighthouses, one of the many spiritual lighthouses on the horizon that can illumine our way and can show us how to live better, how to live a more fulfilled life, how to find peace in a world where there is so much frightening diversity and difference. Thank you. Any questions?